I may have done a parody video about it, but in reality, I'm pretty serious. It's always good to have choices on the market, and for that reason, I like devices with physical QWERTY keyboards. How's it going, guys? I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com. I may not use one in my personal device anymore, but it's always great to have choice, particularly if you're a texter or you're an emailer and you do it quite a bit throughout the day. Sprint users, you're going to love this if you need a physical QWERTY keyboard. This is the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE. It's packing a 1.5 gigahertz dual-core processor, an 8-megapixel camera, very similar in a lot of respects to the Motorola Atrix HD, with a couple of exceptions. One, it doesn't have an HD display, and two, it sports a physical QWERTY keyboard. Is this the ultimate device to get on Sprint, or should you go with something like the Evo 4G LTE or the Samsung Galaxy S3? We'll find out in the review, but first, some love to Best Buy Mobile for hooking us up with phones like this for use in our One Paw Bandit giveaway game, which we turn around and give to you on the site at PhoneDog.com. When you go into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working. They'll help you set up your email, your contacts, your web, and more. So when you walk out the door, you're good to go. You don't have to waste your time setting up your device. You're walking out working at Best Buy Mobile. Let's see, is this thing worth the $200 that it takes to get it at Sprint? We'll find out in the full review, which starts right now. Let me start off the review just by saying this. I'm really impressed with the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE. One of my biggest frustrations with a lot of the wireless carriers and a lot of the OEMs like Motorola, as they approach this, they're like, you know what, we're going to make a device with a great physical QWERTY... I don't really know why I talk like that, but apparently in my mind they do. We're going to make a great device with a physical QWERTY keyboard, and apparently they have a hard time saying QWERTY. But, in my mind. But, you know, who knows? Maybe that's what they actually sound like. But they're like, you know, we're going to make a device excuse me, that's very, mid-range in terms of specs, but has a physical keyboard. It doesn't have to be that way, and I feel like the Motorola Photon Q 4G LTE is proof of that. It's available now at Sprint for $199.99, and for the most part, it packs some pretty killer specs. It's got a 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4 CPU, a 4.3-inch display. Sadly, it's not an HD display. It's a QHD display, 540 by 960 pixels, but it does have Motorola's Color Boost technology, which is a nice touch as well. I will say, after working with this and then using the Motorola Atrix HD and kind of flipping back and forth between them, there is a noticeable difference between a device that has an HD display and a device that doesn't, even with technology like Color Boost, like this has. And that's going to be the challenge for a lot of people that are walking into this and they're like, I got $200. Do I want to spend it on the Photon Q 4G LTE? Do I want to spend it on the Evo 4G LTE? Or do I want to spend it on the Samsung Galaxy S3? All of which, at least of their base models, are at the same price. So that's something to keep in mind as you go to buy. If you need the keyboard, though, it is a physical or great physical QWERTY keyboard, a 5-row with a dedicated number pad, which we'll talk more about later on in the review. 8-megapixel camera with 1080p HD video recording capabilities, a 1,785 milliamp hour non-removable battery, so much like the Droid 4, much like some of Motorola's more recent devices. Non-removable battery there, you love it, you hate it, whatever the case may be. You're going to have to keep a car charger around or something if you're a road warrior. So on this side, you've got your micro USB charging port, your HDMI port on the top. You got a 3.5mm headphone jack and a power button. Over here, a volume rocker, a micro SD card slot, as you can see there, and then a physical camera button. If you watch any of my review videos, you know how much I love a good physical camera button. So really impressed with that. The design, though, is pretty impressive as well. It kind of falls somewhat in line with the Droid Razr, the Droid Razr Max, the Atrix HD, all of the different Motorola devices that have come out so far in the past 12 months or so. That said, I really am impressed with this design. The color scheme works well. I like the kind of curved edges that are still kind of industrial in terms of design. It makes it look good. It's a nice touch. You do get on-screen buttons as well. So Motorola's kind of going with the stock Google look and feel here with on-screen buttons, which brings up another interesting point. Motorola, having gone from the Moto Blur days to where they are now when it comes to software, is very impressive. So all in all, not to spoil the review by any means, but I'm pretty impressed with this device. So it does have a few minor shortcomings, which we'll talk about a little bit later. First of all, to give you some background on the software, it's packing Android 4.0 with Motorola's custom user interface. Now, this is still called Motorola's Applications Platform. It's not called Moto Blur anymore. It is MAP, or Motorola Applications Platform. And out of the gate, you'll see subtle differences between Motorola devices like this and the Motorola devices like the Droid Razr, the Droid Razr Max, the Atrix HD. Kind of differs depending on which one you're using, but out of the gate you do get camera, all the typical stuff, calendar, camera, browser, etc., but you'll see some minor icon differences here between like calendar on this one versus on the Droid Razr, camera on this one versus on the Droid Razr, and more, but you do get kind of the same look and feel. What you do get out of the box though, Chrome, you get, let's scroll through here, Google+, you get Sprint ID, Sprint Zone, Vehicle Mode, voice commands, visual voicemail, which on its base level is free from Sprint. There is an added fee for the higher tier. I want to say it's $199 per month for the premium tier of that. But you'll notice again, Android 4.0, not a whole lot of Sprint stuff pre-installed that you have to worry about trying to get rid of. Sprint ID is pre-installed, Sprint Zone, and to my knowledge, those are unable to be removed. I know Sprint ID is unable to be removed, but let's take a look and see if the other one can be removed. Let's go up here to apps. And let's see, running, looks like it's not, unfortunately. They can be disabled most likely, but not removed. This is another minor point of contention. It's just a design thing. It may not bother you at all. It bothers me a little bit. You have 7 home screens that you can do on this device, and they don't line up like a typical home screen layout where it'd be like 2, 3, 2 on a Samsung device or an HTC device. They line up side by side like that. Now you can add home screens out of the gate. You get like 1, and when you scroll over 1 or 2, when you scroll over it'll ask you just to keep adding until you get to 7. What I don't like is when you get to 7 over here at the end and you go to scroll, it says page limit reached. It's just very ugly and not aesthetically pleasing. I would love for this screen just to not be there. When you get to your maximum level of pages, manage pages is always useful, but that little screen just is annoying and very, unfortunately, pretty bad looking to me. So that's something to keep in mind. It may not bother you at all. Maybe I'm overlooking this, or maybe I'm overdoing this. Just for me, from a design perspective, I don't really care for that particularly. And then also when you hit home, it goes back to the one on the far left instead of the one in the middle. So these are all little design things you may have to put up with. So keeping that in mind, other improvements though to the user interface, you got phone, people, text, and camera out of the box down here. Of course, you can switch these out as you see fit. So if you want to put Gmail, for example, down in the dock because it's what you use on a regular basis, you can also create folders if you see fit. And of course, I can do it that way, and it looks very much like stock Android. Excuse me. Stock Android. And then you have phone, people, text still left. Now, you're going to notice some arrows right beside the Motorola stuff, and you're going to be like, what are those arrows? Unless you already have a Motorola device, in which case you already know what those arrows are. There's little shortcuts where I can bring up text, for example, and just swipe, and it brings up a sample text message I was sending between another review device earlier, for example. Or people, I can swipe up, and it shows me my people. Or phone, I can swipe up, and it shows me missed calls and received calls and more. So it's kind of a shortcut, if you will, between, for example, the browser. I can scroll through and see all my different bookmarks, and then when I'm done, I can scroll down and condense it back. Same thing with email. I can add an account, or I can scroll it back or swipe it back down. Pretty cool little operation there. Pretty cool functionality. Now let's take a look at text messaging here. Now obviously, physical keyboard highlighted this device, and like I said, it's packing Android 4.0 with Motorola's custom user interface. Now I want you to pay close attention to Motorola's user interface, because you're going to find that after looking at the Moto Blur days for all those years of just stock Motorola, for a lot of people, garbage. They didn't care for the look and feel. This is a surprisingly near stock experience. So it's funny to see them go from what was considered to be one of the most, one of the OEMs that, bloated things down, and Motorola was always a problem, and, yada, 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 to a user interface that is very close to stock Google. Granted, that's probably because of the purchase by Google. That could be a huge role in it. But that said, an impressive user interface that takes some of the best stuff of Ice Cream Sandwich and merges it with some very minor customizations from Motorola. So you can see here your settings shortcut. Of course, you can swipe to remove stuff out of the notifications bar, but again, take a look at how stock that looks. You got your 3 buttons down here, back, home, and then recent applications. Again, a very stock look and feel here, and with little to no lag. Take a look at how fast this thing moves. The dual-core processor is pretty impressive in this device. The biggest downside to me, again, the lack of an HD display. It should have an HD display, and that's the thing that when you look at this at $100 or $200 rather versus Galaxy S3 or the One X / Evo 4G LTE on Sprint. I just transitioned that because I totally called it the AT&T name, my bad. The Evo 4G LTE on Sprint, it's going to be a tough buy unless you really just need an absolute QWERTY keyboard. You text, you email a lot, and you need the physical QWERTY keyboard. Back to text messaging though, we'll pull up this sample thread that I was doing between another demo phone, and we'll say the Quick Brown Fox is ready to party, friend. And there we go. So easy to use. Dedicated row for numbers, dedicated row for commonly used symbols. You've got your D-pad over here. It looks a whole lot like the Motorola Droid 4 keyboard. Very, very similar. In fact, it's so similar that I'm going to pull the Droid 4 out of my drawer in my desk and show you how similar these keyboards are to each other. Take a look. Incredibly similar across the board. And another thing I don't care for, I really like this keyboard. It's very tactile. It's very easy to use. One of my favorite, if not my current favorite, physical QWERTY on the market. The only thing I don't like is how close the A and the Z buttons are to each other, because if you look at a standard QWERTY keyboard, you'll notice that the Z button is a little bit below the A button. So just for me, take a look at Z to M, how these are lined up, and then take a look over here where you can see Z to M, and they're kind of angled to the left, if you will. So it makes it hard if you're used to typing on a standard QWERTY keyboard. It makes it a little bit different, a little bit challenging to get used to. That said, always great to have that, and if you don't want to use that, you can scroll back, go back into portrait mode, and use Motorola's multi-touch keyboard, which is available both in portrait and in landscape mode on a 4.3-inch display. So relatively easy to type on, no lag whatsoever. Their keyboard continues to be very good, and then if you still want another option, you're just not satisfied with anything, friend. But if you really want another option, Swype is another choice for you as well, and it's pre-installed out of the gate. It's supposed to be pre-installed out of the gate. Let's see here. There we go, cancel. And then you have Swype, which I'm terrible at, but you have it pre-installed out of the gate. Let's also take a look at the browser. This could take some time to load, so I may actually cut the video while we load the browser because Sprint's 3G network is absolutely miserable in markets that don't have network vision yet, and unfortunately it continues to be the case in the Charlotte metro area, despite the fact that the DNC is coming in a week and a half. But you got your shortcut over here, and it seems to be loading relatively fast at the moment, which is good. But desktop site, all your shortcuts, and then you have your tabs over here, which you can scroll back and forth between your tabs, which both happen to be PhoneDog pages. Who would have thought it? Got your tabs up there. Again, very, very much a stock ice cream sandwich experience, a look and feel here that's very similar to the stock versions that we've seen on the Galaxy Nexus and other devices like the Nexus S. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for that stock experience, it's pretty impressive, and overall the QWERTY keyboard is fantastic. Pinch to zoom, very responsive as well, little to no lag, and then of course portrait to landscape transitions are nice, and you can easily get through to your various tabs from there. And when you're done, if you want to, you can use recent apps to close all that stuff out.